Welcome to Zoom and Google Meet Universities.
How the Pandemic Changed Education, E-Learning as an Alternative to Traditional Classes, an argumentative paper presented by Dorothy, Escoton, and Michelle Tacderan. So the COVID-19 pandemic indeed took the world by surprise as it changed many aspects of our lives, including education. It resulted in the closure of schools worldwide, affecting an estimated of 1.2 billion children. According to the United Nations, most countries around the world have decided to temporarily close educational institutions, impacting 94% of the world's student population, up to 99% in low and lower middle income countries. The pandemic affected various sectors of society, disrupting our normal lifestyle. But life still goes on and learning still continues, thus the shift to everything virtual. Educational institutions are left with no choice but to pursue e-learning to adapt to the new norm. E-learning, also known as online learning, is learning utilizing electronic technologies to access educational curriculum outside of a traditional classroom. Most of the challenges identified with online learning are often linked to the socio-economic background, such as the struggle of students to maintain the learning pace, especially to those who have inadequate resources, and countries who do not have the capacity to provide quality education at this time. In the Philippines, movements like hashtag academic freeze now, hashtag ligtas na balik eskwela, and hashtag piso para sa laptop are all over social media in an effort to voice out their concerns regarding quality education at this time of the pandemic. This new teaching method has shed light on the widening gap between the rich and poor, especially in developing countries, due to the digital divide among the students. While some consider e-learning as the panacea in this time of pandemic, the question is whether it is an effective solution or not. This paper argues that even though e-learning is flexible, it is not an effective alternative to the traditional learning in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic because it is limited to certain disciplines, not easily accessible, and it negatively affects the student's mental health.
E-learning. E-learning is limited to certain disciplines. It is not accessible, negatively affects the student's mental health. Why? One argument against e-learning is that it is limited to certain disciplines of students. According to TAM, the educational disciplines are not created equal and not all of the study fields can be effectively used in online learning. It tends to be more suitable for other certain courses rather than scientific fields, which require a certain degree of hands on practical experience.
In some courses, learning includes acquiring practical skills, exploring, inquiring, seeking solutions to complex problems, learning to work in teams, and more.
All this need direct human interaction, not just teacher student interaction, but also peer engagement, including informal ones, since learning often happens through osmosis in social settings. Students who are taking courses that require practical skills are at a disadvantage because they are not being effectively taught of what they should be learning according to their course's objectives.
Practical skills and other competencies are hard to achieve in a virtual setting where you can't interact with your peers and teachers.
Therefore, e-learning is not fair to all students because some courses are not suitable for online classes. Uh, it is also not accessible to everyone. In a news report by ABS-CBN last year, it was stated that in terms of fixed line internet, the Philippines ranked 101st among 179 countries regarding internet speed. The Philippines' average speed of 19.51 Mbps was much lower than the global average of 57.91 Mbps.
Goldstein and others stated that educators say that some students and their parents have dropped out of touch with schools completely, unavailable by phone, email, or any other form of communication, as families struggle with the broader economic and health effects of the coronavirus outbreak.
The internet connection speed in the Philippines is not a par with other countries, which is crucially in online classes, but unfortunately, not all students and even teachers have that. In addition, not everyone has sufficient gadgets or devices to be used for e-learning since not all Filipinos can afford multiple devices, especially in this time of pandemic.
Thus, pursuing e-learning at this time of pandemic is a big disadvantage, especially to those who are struggling financially, forcing some students not to enroll or even get left behind.
Lastly, e-learning negatively affects the mental health of the students. In a recent survey, it was found out that more than half the students who responded said that they need mental health support since the school closures began in mid-March. That includes 22% who said they were receiving some kind of support before the closures, but now have limited or no access to those services, and an additional 32% who said their mental health needs have arisen since the school closed. In an interview with the director of the Hopkins Pediatric Sleep Center, Dr. Laura Cerny, she expressed her concern that digital learning will disrupt a student's sleep. It is explained that college students specifically are struggling to create an environment free of distractions and develop the necessary organizational skills to stay up on their assignments and activities, noting that these difficulties can affect students' mental health. With the pieces of evidence presented, it can be said that online classes can negatively impact a student's academic performance instead of being an effective alternative to face classes. Therefore, e-learning is a big disadvantage to a student's daily lifestyle as it could negatively affect a student's mental health, which can also lead to physical health deterioration.
E-learning is flexible. Students can pace their own learning process, can practice time management, and enhance their independent learning abilities. Advocates of e-learning point out that is flexible. According to Lim, e-learning has a flexible learning schedule, making it convenient since students have control over how to pace their learning processes. Another psychological reason for its advantage is that is it is less stressful and students are not rushed. Furthermore, the flexibility of e-learning allows students to have comfortable work conditions and increased concentration can be helpful for students who are uncomfortable or distracted in a classroom. In addition, virtual connection can allow students to take classes or participate in programs that would be hard for them to access geographically or economically. The flexibility of e-learning is beneficial, especially in this time of pandemic because of its convenience, which allows students to comfortably learn at their own pace and in their own environment. Students can practice time management to suit their physical and mental needs and also enhance their independent learning abilities without feeling pressured.
Although e-learning is flexible, this argument is inadequate when one considers its adverse effect on students, like being more prone to procrastination and distractions, which are further amplified by the COVID-19 situation. According to Dawan, online learning has so much time and flexibility that students never find time to do it. Thus, personal attention is also a big issue regarding e-learning. Sometimes, students find online teaching boring and unengaging because in online learning, two-way interaction is harder to implement. Also, in a study, students were found to be not well prepared for balancing their work, family, and social lives with their academic life and responsibilities in an online learning environment. Online classes also make the boundary between one's home and school unclear. This boundary is important because besides being a student, they also have other roles such as being a child to their parents. Thus, e-learning is still not an effective alternative to traditional learning because it lacks in many areas and it is not advantageous for the learning process of students in the midst of the pandemic. So, in conclusion, although e-learning was identified as the appropriate substitute for traditional learning to guarantee everyone's safety, it does not ensure quality education and experience. This is because online learning is not available for everyone. It is not really applicable to all disciplines, especially practical courses, and it is not good for the mental health of some students. Some countries have solved this problem by incorporating modular learning and in some a blended mode of learning. What people need the most at this time of the pandemic is more understanding of the different struggles each one is facing. Since it is indefinite when educational institutions open again, it is important to constantly adjust and adapt to the needs and circumstances of the teachers and students. This can be made possible through a constant dialogue between the teachers and students and administrators and considerations on both sides when faced with technical difficulties and by giving appropriate workloads. Even if face to face classes remain unparalleled, given the world's current situation, the best way to address this issue is to make the most out of the given opportunities that e-learning possess. At the same time, the government should do its utmost capability to fight against COVID-19 so that we can go back to traditional learning as soon as possible. So that ends our presentation and thank you.
Thank you.